Okay. Welcome everybody I'm Chairman Thomas. Welcome everybody to the North Ogden City Planning Commission meeting, January 6th, 2021, being held virtually through Zoom. Welcome.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
Okay, there we go.
We'll begin our meeting with invocation or thought provided by Commissioner Lunt, followed which a recitation of the Pledge of Allegiance by Commissioner Waite. Commissioner Lunt.
All right, thanks. Our Father in heaven, we're very grateful for the opportunity that we have to come together tonight to meet as a planning commission, and grateful for the opportunity to be a part of planning for the future of North Ogden. Ask you to please bless as we go through tonight's agenda, that we can be able to constructively discuss the items that come up, and that we can be guided to do the best things for our city and for the citizens who live in it. And we say these things in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, please join in repeating the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We'll take note that all commissioners, with the exception of Commissioner Arner, are in attendance. Commissioner Arner will be joining us later in the meeting.
She actually has joined us.
Oh, she has.
Yep.
See, well, we're all in attendance then. Item number 2 are minutes consideration. The consideration and action to approve the December 16th, 2020 Planning Commission meeting minutes. Do you have any comments?
I reviewed those minutes and I move that we approve them.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. I'll read our opening meeting statement now. Before each agenda item begins, city staff will give a report. After the staff report, the item will be opened for other speakers. The applicant will speak first and be allowed up to 10 minutes following the applicant. Any other interested persons will be allowed to speak for up to 3 minutes. The applicant has final rebuttal time of up to 5 minutes. Any materials that are displayed or referenced, e.g. pictures or written materials, are part of the record and must be forwarded to the commission. Speakers are required to register their full name on Zoom and will state their name and address before beginning their remarks. If you agree with the previous speaker, then state your agreement to avoid repetitious remarks. Speakers shall address all comments to the Planning Commission. And please silence your microphone or mute until ready to speak.
So there was, McConnell was sort of almost looking forward to everything that he was doing.
We got somebody's news on in the background. There we go. Thanks. All right, commissioners, do we have any ex parte communications or conflicts of interest on the agenda tonight? All right, if not, we'll move to item 5. Public comments. At this time, we open up the meeting to any public comments for an item that is not on the agenda. If you'd like to comment and address the Planning Commission, just please raise your hand or send out a chat on the Zoom, and we would love to hear from you at this time.
I don't see any hands, Eric.
All right. Well, we'll move on to our first administrative item. I guess our only administrative item tonight. It's item number 6, Subdivision Ordinance 2018-18, consideration and action regarding final approval and amendment for Mountain Valley Villas Phase 2, 10 lots, located at approximately 800 East, 2700 North. Presenter is Rob Scott. Rob?
Thank you, Chair, members of the commission and audience. As indicated, this is a further review of the phase 2 of Mountain Valley Villas. And Lynn, could you just scroll down to the plat? May need to. There we go. That's great. Thank you. So as part of our review of this particular project, along with the Johnson Webb project, we're back to make a couple of minor amendments to this. The street that is on the north, or kind of bifurcates this, 2625 North, without the dedication of the section of 2625 North in front of the Johnson Webb subdivision, then that lot would not have frontage and we would not be in a position to give approval for that subdivision. So what's being amended, there's 3 aspects to this. The first one is that 2625 North will be dedicated and extended eastward to provide frontage for lot 3 of the Johnson Webb subdivision. So that's right there at the curve, that will be lot 3. Secondly, with the 2625 North dedication, an additional lot, lot 12, I don't know if you can, it's the one the furthest east on the curve. They're adding 1 lot as part of this. You'll see that right there where the cursor is. In order to, as they complete that frontage, it didn't make sense not to go ahead and add that lot as part of this phase 2. And this is consistent with the preliminary plan that was done for Mountain Valley Villas. So they're not doing anything or proposing anything that's out of line with respect to that initial proposal. And lastly, an adjustment is also being made to the detention basin. If you'll scroll up just a hair, you'll see parcel A. There, if you go to your cursor to the left, right there, there's parcel A. That's a detention basin. And in the previous iteration of that, where the cursor is to the right of that north-south line there was a little bit further to the east. And now it's being extended to increase some area for the Johnson Webb subdivision for their use. And the city is actually in favor of this because it means less area that the city is going to have to maintain as far as that detention basin. So just by way of a reminder, this property is 3.4632 acres. It's in the R18 and RE20 zones. The R18 zone requires a minimum lot size of 8,000 square feet for interior lots, 9,000 square feet for corner lots, and a minimum lot width requirement of 80 feet. And now a little bit of a wrinkle here in this next paragraph. As part of the recent rezoning of the Johnson Webb and Mountain Valley Villas properties, the approval included authority to adjust the zone boundary lines to match the subdivision boundary lines. So the Mountain Valley Villas property is R18, and you'll recall that Johnson Webb and his lot 3 wanted RE20. So in this instance, we're recommending or recognizing that as part of the extension of that detention basin, we want to have all of lot 3 be in the RE20 zone. So we're making that more of a informational item as opposed to an approval item. There's all of the other previous conditions are in place and those will not change. Staff is recommending final approval of the modified Mountain Valley Villas subdivision, phase 2, subject to the conditions in the staff report. All of lot 3 of the Johnson Webb subdivision will be zoned RE20. And I'd be happy to answer questions, commissioners.
Did I understand right, Rob, that lot 3 will be rezoned to RE20?
It's already RE20. It's just that little adjustment with the detention basin. That little adjustment will also be RE20.
Okay.
But the adjustments on the Johnson Webb subdivision, and we don't have any of that information with us right now, right?
You already have had that previously. There was a rezone
Okay.
as part of an earlier approval for both Johnson Webb and for the Mountain Valley Villas.
So,
Mountain
so
Valley Villas,
answer,
Mountain Valley Villas is R18. Johnson Webb's lot 3 is RE20.
okay. So to answer kind of, I had the same question at first. Lot 3, as we've got on this plat, is not the one that's RE20. That's still a R18.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
Okay.
The R, if you go down to Exhibit D, I think it is, Lynn. I think that'll clear that up. Sorry, so now you see the Johnson Webb subdivision. You'll see the curve there and the street. So there's lot 3 of the Johnson Webb subdivision. It's only that lot that will be RE20. All of Mountain Valley Villas will be the R18 zone. Sorry, I didn't make that clear.
Okay, so I guess I better ask my question that I was going to have on the other lot, but is that a conforming lot with the 20,000 square foot?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Any other questions, commissioners?
No, none for me. All right, thanks, Rob. I guess before we have any discussion, is the applicant or anybody here that would like to say something on this?
Yes, Pat Burns is on. Go ahead,
Okay.
Pat.
Hey guys, I kind of got in at the last bit of it. I didn't hear everything, but
Will you
If
state
there's
your
any-
name and address?
I apologize. Pat Burns, 1407 North Mountain Road.
So Pat, yeah, Rob kind of brought us up to speed. The adjustment to the lot 3 and the detention pond property, there's a little of adjustment there. Lot 3
Yes.
staying as RE20. The remainder is the R110. And then you added that lot up on the corner in the Mountain Valley subdivision, right?
Into the
Lot.
first phase, yep.
Yeah, 8 or something like that. Or I'm looking at the Johnson Webb, sorry. So that's what we went over. Anything else you would like to add to that, or?
No, that was it. There's nothing else
Okay.
that I need to add. No, sorry.
Commissioners, is there any questions for the applicant? All right, well, if not, maybe hang on the line there, Pat, and we'll give the public an opportunity if they have any questions. So let's go ahead and open up to the public. If anybody would like to comment on this, please raise your hand or type a chat out, and we'd love to hear from you. Again, you are addressing the commission and not the applicant.
I don't see any hands, Eric.
All right, thanks. Well, Pat, I guess there's not any rebuttal for you, so thank you. Commissioners, is there any questions or discussion on this item?
Would you entertain a motion?
I would.
I'll make a motion that we grant final approval of the modified Mountain Valley Villa subdivision Phase 2, subject to the conditions in the staff report. And with a note that all of Lot 3 of the Johnson Webb subdivision will be zoned RE20.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
I'm confused. Did that need to include the 2625 north be dedicated and extended and lot 12 added? Did I miss that? She said it.
That was what the application is for, the agenda item. So
Okay.
that was all part of the staff report as well.
Okay. I'm fine.
Okay, Commissioner
Yes,
Waite.
Yes.
Commissioner Mason,
Yes.
Commissioner Nancaro,
Yes.
Commissioner Lunt,
Yes.
Commissioner Barker,
Yes.
Commissioner Arner.
We might have lost Commissioner Arner for a minute.
Okay, I vote yes. That gets approved. We'll note Commissioner Arner did not vote on this due to technological problems. Moving on to item number 7, our legislative item, Zone Text Amendment 2020-10. This is a public hearing for consideration and recommendation regarding amending the city code to allow tattoo studios in as an allowed use in commercial zones. Brandon Bell will be our presenter. Brandon?
Good evening, members of the commission and chair. So within the last few months, we had an applicant submit a application for a business license for tattoo studios, and the staff looked at it. We didn't feel comfortable qualifying the particular use of tattoo studios under our existing uses. We didn't feel like it fit under the existing use categories. There were multiple uses that were proposed as part of this business license application, however, inside the proposed facility. Those included microblading, permanent makeup, and massage services as well. Staff did issue a limited approval of the business license for those uses. But again, the tattoo studio, we didn't feel comfortable that could be properly classified under a currently existing use category. I surveyed some of the planners throughout the state regarding these types of businesses through an email listserv, and one planner did state that these businesses are similar somewhat in nature regarding their external impact on the community to a beauty salon. What I mean by external impact is things like the amount of traffic that they generate, things like that. That same planner also stated that they hadn't had any issues arise from these businesses, that they're quiet, low-key, and that they don't generate an excessive amount of traffic. On the other hand, another planner stated that in his role serving as a member of a planning commission, he's a professional planner as well as has been served on planning commissions, that they, in their role as planning commission, had included requirements regarding building colors, signs being limited, and a requirement for an outside area to linger. We already have color requirements that are just applied broadly, so we didn't feel like that was something we needed to raise. And then there's also independent sign standards that cover any sign regardless of use, regardless of the use that it's advertising for. In fact, I don't believe we can restrict or have special exceptions based on use for signage. But then, or special requirements. Historically, regarding the historical context, we're at a moment in time in which tattoo studios are generally more broadly accepted than they have been in the past. The city basically has 3 options to pursue as a policy. The first is to essentially keep it the way it is, which is to not permit them as a use. The second is to allow them as a permitted use. And then the third would be to allow them as a use with some additional, as a permitted use with some additional requirements, such as standards for the range of hours of operations, or another potential requirement would be distances from other tattoo studios, or not only tattoo studios, but other businesses such as like sexually oriented businesses, or check cashing businesses, things like that. And so we always want to compare these things against the general plan. The relevant goals that I pulled from the general plan on this topic basically came from the economic development section of the general plan. I didn't find any particular strategies that there's the goals themselves in the general plan, and then there's specific strategies to accomplish those more general goals. I didn't find any particular strategies that were specific to something like a tattoo studio, but the general goals may be applicable. The first is increase revenue rate that matches or exceeds population growth. The second was diversify the entertainment, restaurant, and retail offerings within the city. And the third was assure a quality commercial shopping environment. So again, the policy options were allow as a permitted use, not allow as a permitted use, or as allow as a permitted use with additional requirements, which again would be distance from other establishments of the same use or of other uses potentially, a specified range of hours of operation, and there may be potentially others. I did come across in the survey, I didn't have time to read through this document, but I was sent by, until just a couple hours before the meeting, but I was sent by another planner in a nearby city that they stated that a couple of their examples were to have to allow these with in their commercial district with a couple of separation requirements. For example, that they would have to be at least 1/3 mile away from another tattoo studio. Another was that they need to be at least 880 feet away from a payday lending establishment, pawn and secondhand business, or sexually oriented business. Another option that they looked at was allow them in both the commercial and the manufacturing zoning districts. And then let's see.
Brandon, sorry to cut you off, but just while I'm thinking of it, did they say the purpose for putting them? I mean, if you're going to allow a tattoo shop, like what's the purpose of distancing two tattoo shops, or what would be the purpose of distancing it from another type of business? Or do you know that, the answer to that? I realize you're just stating what other people have done.
Sorry, what was the last part? You realize what?
Well, I guess I just realized you're just stating what other cities have done, and you may not know the purpose behind it. But I'm asking if you do know the purpose behind it.
I can't say, specifically. Historically, there's been concern about uses that are, in certain categories. Obviously, there's strict requirements for sexually oriented businesses. Tattoo studios aren't in the same category, but they're maybe more similar to, there's been concerns about having too many of them, just as there's been with like payday loan requirements and pawn shops, etc. So, I think that people there might be concern that they would be a nuisance of some type. And so I think that would probably be the motivation behind those, while not being certain.
Thanks.
So again, there's there's the allowing them in the C2 zone, or the C1 and C2 zone, the commercial zones, which by implication, would also allow them in the CP1 and CP2 zone, or you could also allow them in the M1 zone zoning district, and then you could add those other potential requirements. Let's see, or you could potentially only allow them in the M1 zone, I guess, is another option. So those, I just wanted to give you a sort of a palette of possibilities. I think that covers those possibilities. The considerations that you might want to think about are, first, should the city standards for the commercial zones allow tattoo studios as a permitted use? Should there be additional standards? And is the amendment consistent with the general plan? Staff recommendation is that the Planning Commission conduct a public hearing, receive input, and discuss the potential amendment and any changes, and make a recommendation to the City Council if the Commission believes the ordinance should be and is ready to be considered by the Council. And then a final note, just might need to, if you decide that you'd like to recommend this to the council, I may need to make some minor adjustments to the formatting and presentation of the ordinance. Just as I reviewed it today. And then another issue came up just in the last 24 hours, is that the issue of body piercings typically goes along with tattoo studios. And so is that something that you'd want to add into the language? As John and I discussed it, we felt that if body piercings was part of a larger establishment with other uses, we don't feel that it needs its own use, but if it were like part of a more traditional beauty shop. But if you're going to be proving tattoo studios, they tend to go together quite frequently. So it might be good to just add that to the language in the ordinance, since it tends to be common for them to be joined together as a use. And I think that covers all of my prepared remarks and thoughts. What questions might you have for me?
Hey, Brandon and Scott, are they going to be, where are they going to be located? They got a location yet?
Well, if you allowed it as a use in this zone as part of this zoning amendment, this would allow it across whatever zone in that you permit it in. So there is a specific application for a business license on the table that's at 2300 North, approximately. It's in it's the shopping center there. And so there is a business license application that's submitted the application, and then they also had to submit this application for the zoning amendment. But if you allow it as an approved use, they would not be the only person that's able to, or only establishment that would be able to potentially establish a tattoo studio in North Ogden. It would be something that, other people would be able to open up as well. So there's a more general consideration on the table, I'd say as well.
Well, unless we made the distance between tattoo parlors so large that nobody could come in besides them, like we tried to do with the payday loans.
Hey, Brandon.
Yes.
You mentioned, and I just kind of wanted to reiterate or make sure I understood it right. In terms of signage, yeah, there's not a lot we can do about what's written on the sign because that kind of is a Second Amendment thing. In terms of building color and composition, that's one of the things I've noticed is it's gonna sound and probably make myself sound like so many of either the names of the tattoo places or the color and decoration are really, really, really lean toward the dark side of everything. And that's probably my biggest objection. If somebody wants to go get a tattoo, I really don't care. But if I got to drive past a building that's got skulls and crossbones and, dead horses and all kinds of stuff decorating it, then that bothers me a little bit more. Because now, but our ordinance right now pretty well eliminates that possibility. Is that correct?
That's my understanding. I guess I need to check and make sure that we have, if you recall when we had the Arby's come in and we've had other commercials, when we get, when we've had those applications, we had pretty stringent review of their colors, and it specified, earth tones, and it talks about browns and grays and things like tans. And so that's really independent of the use, and that if they were to go and paint their building or something like that, that would be something that we would restrict independent of the use. And I believe that standard applies to all of our commercial zones. I need to double check that actually, but I believe it applies to all of our commercial zones. So.
Okay. Yeah, that was probably the biggest question I had.
Okay, any other discussion we feel like we need to have before we open the public hearing?
Do you want to have discussion? I mean, I have thoughts, but you want
Well, do we want to do discussion prior to the public? I mean, we'll end up having discussion after as well. So I guess maybe
I can
thoughts.
Okay, I can pose a couple general questions. I mean, to Don's issue, I can envision a nice looking building that has a very still colorful sign, and I've seen a few of those in resort towns and stuff that have tattoo shops, and I didn't feel that the building itself was any kind of a deterrent. I personally, when I read this on the agenda item, I thought, oh, I mean, it's a business. Why wouldn't we want that? So as I've thought about it further, my only slight concern, and I don't really have many, to be honest with you, would be, does the existence of, and I think this is something that we should debate, does the existence of a tattoo parlor limit the infill of other buildings or businesses to come around it, right? In other words, I don't want to make a moral objection at all to a tattoo parlor, even having, people who want tattoos frequenting it. I think that's absolutely fine. But does it have an economic impact around it? And I think that's the only question. I know how I feel about it, but I'll maybe just pose that.
Okay. Commissioners, any other thoughts or discussion? I mean, from my standpoint, I'm kind of similar. It's like, I don't lump this into a category of maybe, as was mentioned, not that it was lumped into, but some people may look at this and say, oh, it should be treated like a sexually earned business. It's only allowed certain places or things. I don't see that. It is a business, and they're not. I think times have changed. It's tattoos aren't done in the back alleys of people's places anymore. It's a prominent business, and it's a popular thing nowadays, and it's done clean and nice and professional. So, and that is saying, is this a business that we'd welcome? Our other ordinances should, control what we have for signage and what buildings look like and things like that. So I don't see a need to have any special requirements for this type of business. The question is probably more proposed is it one of those things that we do put a limitation of saying, yeah, we would allow, so many of them in the city, or distance them, just to help limit, probably more so if it's one of those more specialized businesses, and maybe help to ensure some success of them, that we don't see a overcrowding as well. So,
in my opinion,
oh, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, I talk all the time.
Oh, I was just going to say, I guess as the discussion was going on, I would, instead of sort of a nuisance, I would almost liken a tattoo shop more closely to like a nail salon or a hair salon. And I wonder if we have any of these, stricter regulations about distancing or competition for those types of, hair salons and nail shops and stuff in our ordinance. And if we don't, I don't see how a tattoo shop would be any different.
Agreed. In my opinion, it's like, this is a crazy analogy, but it's like, grandma says I'm not supposed to play with face cards, right? Because they're bad and they have that bad element, and you're always like scratching your head like, what? Okay, what is it? I don't see necessarily tattoo parlors as being, and my grandma would have probably disagreed with this, but like Eric said, I think it's become more socially the norm. And yeah. Now the other thing about to the comment of, do we want to limit them? I don't personally have any interest in limiting space between them or anything, because I feel like the natural laws of supply and demand will limit those. I mean, is there really enough market for 12 tattoo parlors in North Ogden? And I would say no. I mean, some of those are going out of business, and I don't think anyone would take that on. I can't imagine North Ogden becoming the mecca of tattoo artists, right? But
no, and I would agree. And actually, evidence probably shows. I think at one time when we talked about distancing, and as we discussed creating an area for check cashing or title loan places, they came to North Ogden, thought it was going to be great, and ended up not being here that long because they decided it wasn't. And so obviously competition would not survive for that type of business. So I would agree with you.
Yeah, and I'm not one who would ever propose any kind of prohibitions on the syntax or whatever, right? Like we sell. Anyway, I just don't support that in general, but I'm definitely open to what the public thinks.
I would say I too am open to the idea, and also just in response to Brandon's earlier thought that the body piercing side of it, if that needs to be included, I think I would support that as well. Typically, even for my own kids, when we do piercing ears or whatever, we have taken them to tattoo parlors because they tend to have a better process and equipment to do it. So just a thought.
Well, I think that's a good suggestion as well. So, well, maybe on that note, commissioners, let's go ahead and open the public hearing. At this time, we'll open the public hearing to hear comments on whether we should allow tattoo studios should be allowed as allowed use in the commercial zones for North Ogden. Zone Text Amendment 2020-10 public hearing. This time, if the public would like to make a comment, please raise your hand or chat, and we'd love to hear from you.
If I could interject really quick, we do have the applicant with us.
Okay.
And then also she's in the participants list. And then I checked on the matter regarding Commissioner Waite's comment about the colors, and they do apply in all the commercial zones and therefore would apply independent of the business to all businesses in those zones. So.
Okay, well, maybe at the beginning of this public hearing, let's go ahead and have, if the applicant would like to address us, they could do so at this time, and then just be followed by the public as well. So the public is aware, this is not an application for a specific business. This is simply an application that this type of business becomes an allowed use. If it's approved, then I'm sure it will be followed up with an application for a business, but at this time, the business is not as an application, just to make sure that that's clear.
Kimsha, if you'd like to speak, would you please give your name and address?
Kimsha Byrne, 4743 South, 575 West in Riverdale, 84405. I'm here with my husband and partner, Joe, as well.
Hello.
And we wanted to briefly bring to your attention that we're opening a mindful tattoo studio. It isn't something that is practiced. Traditionally, it was in the past more spiritual process. And so we are focused on bringing it back to its traditional sense. And we're very much a private studio, also offering education in tattoo because there's not a lot of regulation. And so we do care about the education as well, and proper tattoo techniques, as well as contamination and health and safety.
OSHA. We have a studio on Oahu as well, and we're actually we're the only one on Oahu that has been OSHA certified. So we take it very seriously. As was said earlier, the tattoo industry has changed quite a bit. Even in my own career, I've been tattooing for about 12 years and have personally got to watch it change dramatically thanks to things like the internet and television has obviously become widely accepted. But on that same note, many people are trying to learn how to tattoo on their own, which is putting a great risk out there. So we actually have a school that we're putting together to try to help the industry to be safer for all of the clients that are going to tattoo studios and hoping to get a good, safe, clean tattoo.
One question for the applicant.
Sure.
If you own a successful tattoo parlor on Oahu, what are you doing in Riverdale, Utah? I'll just leave that out there.
We'll get that every
That's
day.
rhetorical.
We have family here, and with the pandemic, there's been a lot of restrictions on the island, and our studio was shut down, mandatory shutdown for 4 months, and we really wanted to just continue making change, and Utah's second home to us, so we decided to relocate and come to the mountains. And
yeah, I have family here, so she's from Hawaii, I'm from Utah. It kind of makes sense.
So we just wanted to bring our practice here with us and see if we can share our knowledge and help make the industry better, really.
One more comment from me, sorry. But in anticipation of this, I actually Googled around, should tattoo parlors be, to try to get a pro and con of this. And I saw the negative impact the pandemic had on your specific industry in a lot of states, and you have my sympathy there. That seems like a rough deal.
Yeah.
So no question there, just
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Tough pull there, guys.
Yeah.
We don't have any other comments. Does anyone
All right,
have
thank you
for us.
Thank you for your comments. We may have some questions for you after the public hearing and some discussion.
Okay.
So hang tight, but we'll go ahead now and move into the public hearing and invite any other public to make comment to the Planning Commission on this item.
I don't see any hands.
Okay. It looks like we only have 2 other attendees besides the applicants. So, all right, well, I'd entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to close the public hearing for the Zone Text Amendment 2020-10. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Public hearing is now closed. We'll move into our discussion and recommendation segment of our item here. Further discussion, commissioners?
I have a couple of things. I like the fact they're working like OSHA to make sure what they're doing is clean, things are thorough, and it's well taken care of. And I think of most of our city codes, so we need to have a place for the city to be, for signage and colors and controlled like that is already in place. And I don't see any need to distance anything. I think it'd be self-monitoring, because you try to throw another tattoo place in North Ogden, one of them's not going to survive.
So I do think it's worthy of debating. I mean, I'm a go on this where I'm at right now, but I do it doesn't, there's a cost to it. And just think, if we allow this, and this seems like the nicest establishment, right, from the nicest people, and all that, right? But if we allow tattoo parlors and there's a vacant lot or something, and a baby toy store may think twice before moving in next door, right? Meaning not that they would object to tattoo parlors, but they might say, hey, does this, if I can build here in North Ogden and the lot is next to the tattoo parlor, or in Pleasant View and it's next to 7-Eleven or something, they might choose that other location over this. Now, I just want to bring that up as a concern. It's not an overriding concern for me, but I think the reality is that it may detract some future business, right? But I guess that's probably the case with anything, right? Like, would you also want to have a meditation studio next to a tire store, right? No. So I think there's a cost to any kind of business we allow. And the reason I use tire store was just because they're loud, right? Not because they're offensive. But I'm still a go on allowing this.
Go ahead, Don.
I did have a question, and I know it's really outside the scope of what we're actually commissioned to look at and consider, but what regulations are in place? I mean, there are, some fairly serious implications. And I know we mentioned nail studios, we mentioned beauty salons. Those are heavily regulated by the state health department. What regulations are there in place? And like I said, it's not really part of our discussion, or it doesn't even fall under our umbrella, but it's something I've been wondering about since this came up.
So I think I can respond to that. I don't have a lot of details, but we checked with the state and they said that they didn't have direct regulations, but we were told that so there is a business license application on the table, but that's a separate application. It's by the same applicant, and as part of the business license application, they need to get some sort of approval from the county. Is the short answer. The county health department regulates it. I have a document, a white paper that they've provided. I haven't been able to go through it yet, but there's some form of county permission that's required, is my understanding.
Okay. Yeah, I had no idea, but I know there are some pretty serious health implications, with, hepatitis and AIDS and some of these other things that are bloodborne diseases. But like I said, I have no idea. And I think it's beyond our scope anyway to consider it or make it a factor in whether we approve this or not.
The applicant has their hand raised. Would you like to hear from them?
Yeah.
I would love to hear from them.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt, but I thought I could also help with this question. It's a really good question, which is why we have set up an institution to help to make law changes in the tattoo industry. Currently in Utah, really the regulation is bloodborne pathogens testing. That is an online form of education. It goes over all of our cross-contaminations with things like you mentioned. They're done about hepatitis, HIV, a few different skin diseases, which is good. Although we're actually pushing to make it a lot more in-depth and get further education out there to the entire industry, more along the lines of, say, like a nurse might have to go to get. But yeah, to answer your question, bloodborne pathogen certificates are what's currently regulated.
Okay.
Thank you for that information.
This is Commissioner Nancaro. A question for the applicant. Along those lines, it seems like the health department would have at least the same type of oversight to a tattoo shop as they would to a hair salon or a nail salon. Would you say that's true?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. Thank you.
I have I was just thinking about, I don't know if we need to prematurely worry about who may or may not like to be next to certain stores, because if I want to open a green smoothie shop, whether I put it next to a donut shop or a fast food store, you could say possibly you don't attract the same clientele. But as long as the building is nicely, classy and nice, I don't know that it would be a detraction for people. I mean, like if it's next to, say, a smoothie shop, for instance, I'll still go get a smoothie, but maybe I don't want to get a tattoo, but no big deal. So that's just my 2 cents, but.
I agree with you, Commissioner Arner. And, there was a comment made earlier. I don't remember who made it, but it was sort of like, if there were a baby store or something, it might. But the thing is this is legitimate business, and we should look at it as a legitimate business, like I said, along the lines of a hair salon or anything else. And, if they've established themselves in our community, then it's up to whoever is coming next to make those decisions, whether they want to be in that location or not. And I don't think we should, forecast how somebody's going to react and give that business a higher value or a higher priority than this proprietor, because I don't think that's fair. And I think this is a legitimate business. I don't think it's a nuisance. You know, it's an
Right.
artistic shop that's doing a legitimate business.
And it's
And
not the same as like, oh man, we should have thought of putting sidewalks up this road.
Right.
So Commissioner Nancarrow, that was me that made that comment about the baby store. I just don't want the perception that I discredit this as a legitimate business. Absolutely not. I was just saying, like anything, if I was opening a new business, I would take a look at, okay, what's around me, right? And I was also trying to say there's a cost to anything, right? Like whatever we decide to put in there, it may or may not be in harmony with whoever wants to come into the future. And so that's all I was trying to say. And I was nothing with discrediting this as an industry or a business or anything, because I don't feel that way.
Okay.
All right. Well, any other discussion or entertain a motion of recommendation? Again, this is a legislative item. It's a recommendation to the city council, as Brandon has put together an ordinance, essentially adding tattoo art studios, including laser removal. And I would suggest we probably add, as we talked about, body piercing to be permitted uses in the C1 and C2 zones.
Well, I would move that we recommend to the city council that this be allowed as stated by Commissioner Thomas.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion?
I do have one more question. I was just looking at my notes. What zones would we be referring to? Do we have any restrictions on zones, whether it's C1, C2? Should we address that in the motion as well?
Commissioner Thomas, my motion included what Commissioner Thomas said, which was C1, C2.
Okay.
So just
my intention with my motion was to include C1 and C2.
Okay.
So just to clarify, the ordinance shows C1 and C2. The way our code is structured, that would automatically mean that it's permitted in the CP1 and CP2 zone, which are basically modified versions of the C1 and C2 zone. It's not a big deal, but I just want to make sure I'm being forthright and doesn't feel like we're slipping something under the rug, or past you, so to speak. So it'd be the C1, C2 zones and the CP1 and CP2 zones.
Okay, I modify my my motion to include C1, C2, C3PO.
Second again.
Commissioner Bell.
Second that again.
Right, thank you. Let's go ahead and vote. Commissioner Waite?
Yes.
Commissioner Mason?
Yes.
Commissioner Nancarrow?
Yes.
Commissioner Lunt?
Yes.
Commissioner Barker?
Yes.
Commissioner Arner?
Yes.
And I vote yes. So that positive recommendation will move on to the city council. Sorry, I've got to scroll back up to the top here. All right. Next, our item number 8, Zone Text Amendment 2018-3. Discussion regarding the sensitive lands map. Presenter is Rob Scott. Rob?
Thank you, commissioners. As you well know, we've had a number of discussions about the sensitive lands ordinance, and the Planning Commission had requested that we develop a map for where that overlay would occur. So I've been working with Lauren Gardner on this, since sensitive lands obviously involve technical and the hard sciences, if you will, geology and hydrology and what have you. So Lauren and I are both co-authors of this particular recommendation to you. So I have given you a little bit of information with respect to our general plan has a environmental chapter in it, and previously there was a North Hillside development study And I gave you links to both of those documents. Maybe we could go down to the maps, Lynn. You just need to go to one of them. So as a part of our review, we ended up looking at the attached map as to the boundary where that overlay would be applied. It's basically all of the existing HP zone properties and everything to and or north and east of either the Mountain Road alignment. So you can kind of see where that is. So we also gave you some geologic and other hydrologic maps and what have you. Let me just ask the commission, Lauren is prepared to give you an overview of those. The question is, are you interested in having him do that tonight? Or if you're feeling like you want to ask some more questions about that, let's entertain the discussion. Where we would go from here is we would make this part of the adoption of the ordinance. We would also include that as a part of the ordinance, as the application of it.
So my only question about the map is, didn't we discuss also that it would follow down some of those old drainages? I know there's been a push by a few residents to protect the creek that runs on the other side of Washington Boulevard on the west side, excuse me. You know, was there any consideration to that, or was that too small of an area to extend these to?
Well, we generally have been talking about the area. It's pretty much a slope-based ordinance. So it's the hillside areas that we primarily focused on.
Okay, I actually agree with that.
Would you like to hear from Lauren with respect to any of these specific maps?
Well, maybe,
all right.
Maybe just briefly, Lauren, how you know, high level, how you calculated that?
High level, huh? Okay.
Well, remember who you're talking to. I'm asking you to dumb it down for me.
I have several maps that are available. One is our slope map. The other is liquefaction areas. The other is geological, such as earthquake faults and areas for debris flows. So I could go over those maps if you'd like. Lynn, do you have those maps available that we can share? Otherwise, I could share them.
Which ones are you talking about?
The maps that I sent you, there's 5.
Oh. Yeah, if you've got them, why don't you pull them up?
Okay. Let me see. I'll share my screen here, but
now let me stop sharing.
yeah, you're gonna have to all right, can you see that now?
Yes.
Okay, this first one is the slopes. Everything in red, let's go to the legend. Everything in red is 30% and greater, and then it sort of pink, and that is 20%, and then 10 to 20 is less than that. So we don't have a lot of area in the city that is 30% or greater, but we do have some. And as you can see, all of that, for the most part, is all above Mountain Road, where our slopes are very steep. We do have a section up here on this long bench area that's 30%, but that won't be buildable. And then we have an area right here where there is some previous landslides that have some steep slopes. I'll find that area right here and show you also. So this one here is landslides and debris flow areas. This is the Barrett Canyon. These are some up by the north, up by some of Marriott's area. This is one where we just finished the debris basin. So these are some areas that have landslide and debris flows. This map right here shows us where the fault line, the major fault line is. And then we have these little red lines. These are fault traces right above the long bench. This whole area here is that big old landslide area. So those are some areas where we have potential problems. This map here deals with our aquifer recharge and discharge areas. So we've got all the brown is primary recharge. The lighter brown is the secondary recharge, and this one's showing discharge areas. And here's our mountain road corridor right through this area. The last map we have, this is our liquefaction zone. The whole city's in some zone of liquefaction, but Code 1, which is the majority of the area that we're dealing with, is a very minor liquefaction, and it's most likely due to high groundwater and soil types. As we get down on the flatter areas down in here, that's where the higher liquefaction areas are. So those are some of the hazards that we're dealing with. And the majority of those hazard issues are above mountain road that we're dealing with. And that's why we've designated that as the sensitive lands area. So if you have any questions or concerns about any of these areas.
I have a question or a concern, I'm not sure which. You had the fault traces which come off the Wasatch Fault. The ones you had on there, are those the ones that are known of, or are they located? Because I'm sure there's a lot more fault traces than that going through North Ogden.
These are the main ones that the state geologist has identified.
Okay.
As projects come in, we have them do more detailed locations of some of those faults and fault traces.
Okay.
But these are the main ones that the state geologist has identified.
Okay. Yeah, because I've heard of others, a fault trace that goes along Fruitland Drive, but I've never been able to find sources that say that's for sure.
Yeah, I have not seen any maps that indicate that, but that doesn't mean they don't exist either. So.
Okay.
Any
Thank
other
you, Lauren.
questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
So commissioners, the next step would be that if you're satisfied with this map location, then I'll include that in the ordinance as we proceed. I've got just a few touch-up things to do. Hopefully, if not the next meeting, probably the first meeting in February, I'm going to shoot for that to be our public hearing for this ordinance.
I guess I'd better ask this question, Rob. Does this area encroach on any existing development which would create nonconformity? Have we looked at that? And maybe that's not an issue.
Well, we already have existing ordinances that require specific studies for the geotechnical reports and what have you that we already do have. So yes, we do have a few subdivisions that are included within this, but that would not impact them since they're already existing.
Okay, right, but would they then be non-conforming in their own subdivisions?
Not really, no.
Okay, okay.
Remember, this is an overlay. So the underlying zoning is still the rules, and then this adds some additional, but it adds some additional conditions on development, but it also allows some additional things that the underlying zones may not allow, like what we had talked about previously with flag lots, and unique situations like that. So, but just off the cuff, what I could see, it looks like Mason Cove is in this area, the cove itself, which has been developed, and I couldn't tell if part of Halltree is that dip into this, or it's maybe future phases of that, and really maybe just some existing homes above Mountain Road there as you head south.
Future phases of Halltree would be part of this.
You know, okay. Well, I think that map looks good, Rob. I would like that to be included in, as we go forward.
Well, thanks for your input. And if you have other comments along the way, please feel free to share them with us.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
All right, item number 9, Zone Text Amendment 2018-10, discussion regarding amending the city code to establish streetscape standards. Presenter is Kai Johnson. Kai?
Good evening, Chair and Commission. So tonight we're going to be talking about the streetscape for Monroe Boulevard. This one is probably the farthest out as far as being completed, but it's probably one of the more controversial ones that we're going to deal with. So the way we're going to go about this, Lynn, can you share, can I share my screen, please, Lynn?
Yes, just a sec. Go ahead.
Let me get to my place in the agenda. So while I'm doing this, we can talk about it. So some of the things we're going to need to talk about are going to be mainly is induced demand, which is essentially if you build it, they will come. The city's already started purchasing right of way for Monroe, which is already inducing demand. There's been 2 subdivisions, the Mountain Valley Villas project, as well as another subdivision where a trail connection was missed that kind of is bringing this about right now, as well as I've been working on this project since I started with the city, really. So most of the land uses around Monroe are low density, large lot, R18 to R110, RE20 as well. This is a city-owned street, so there's a lot of discretion as far as the design of it. It's all right. We can decide the lane widths, street trees, islands, medians. There's a lot of detail to work out, and that's what I'm hoping to get a basis, mostly in like lane widths and bike lanes and active transportation network as well. So in the general plan, it talks a lot about transportation. Specifically in regards to this streetscape, there's a complete streets policy that was adopted back in 2019 that basically, in consideration of all streets, all users need to be included. That is to say, cars, pedestrians, and cyclists all have the same right to use the street safely, and they have space to do so. So moving forward, kind of some of the considerations are, what's the feel of this street? What do we want Monroe to look like and feel like as people come from Ogden, in and out of North Ogden, things like that. As well as sidewalk width. Our standard sidewalk width right now is 4 feet, which isn't adequate for 2 users to use comfortably. I would recommend at the very least we consider going to a 5-foot minimum citywide along Monroe. If we're going to consider it a trail, maybe 6 feet along Monroe. And in regards to another issue is there's a disparity between design speed and the speed limit. That is to say, if the speed limit's 25, but you feel safe driving 35 or 40, you will do so. So to combat that, there's traffic calming measures such as street trees, bulb outs, or islands. Another thing we could consider is, as this goes forward, if there's things we want to try on Monroe, we can work with use tactical urbanism to test things along other streets that are already existing. And maybe as Monroe is completed, we can utilize those techniques. The last item we will probably talk about will be trees. Along Monroe or Washington, we went with flowering crabapple trees, I believe, is one of the species. Basically, a faux flowering trees along the streetscape is kind of what we went for. Along Monroe, what is the Planning Commission's flavor for street trees? So my presentations are going to be kind of a broad overview of suburban walkability. Then I'm going to get down into the Monroe streetscape, and I have some maps from the Wasatch Front Regional Council that I think are relevant to this discussion. So this is a quote from the, yes, sir.
So along that corridor that is Monroe, there's no commercial in the general plan along there, correct?
No, that is something we will talk about, because right now there's kind of a little bit of conflict in the general plan map and what's proposed as far as transportation. So yeah, there's no commercial proposed now, but we are updating the general plan, and there has been a proposed future land use map change. So
I'd just like to point out to the commission, there's also very little commercial along Monroe. I mean, once you get down, closer to 12th Street, there's a couple of things that pop up, but it's mostly residential. Well, once it leaves North Ogden and hits Ogden City, it's mostly residential. I mean, through Ben Lomond High area, there's a convenience store somewhere in there, but there's some spotting commercial, but it's mostly homes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is a really good thing to bring up as the streetscape as it relates to Ogden, what they're planning for in the future, if we want to match that. Or
yeah, can I mention also, I'm actually a heavy user of Monroe. Well, hold on, when I used to leave the house, I was a heavy user of Monroe. I just choose to drive down it to even get places. Anytime I'm going to Lowe's, I go down 1050 and then hit Mountain Road, then Monroe. And I've not only driving it, but I also have used it frequently. I run frequently from my house to Dillon's. It's 9 miles, and it's downhill, which is the best part of it. And so I run along there. I've actually biked to work when I work in Riverdale a few times, and I use Monroe because it's so much better than Washington, right? And so I think some of those uses need to be considered. I mean, that's a nice corridor to get down to the Ogden Parkway and stuff from North Ogden on a bike and on foot. And I know it seems like a long way, but it's not. It's downhill, and it's a kind of a nice little jaunt.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, Commissioner Mason. So induced demand, this diagram kind of highlights that really well. As mentioned earlier, the city has started purchasing right-of-way for this road, so that has already begun to induce demand. As of late, it seems like development in the city is taken off, surprisingly, with the pandemic. It hasn't slowed down at all. Building permits are coming in like crazy. So walkability, that is kind of needs to be talked about in relation to this as well. Walkability and land use are closely related because walkability is the form of transportation. This here is kind of a map from walkscore.com. They rate it basically on commercial uses. In regards to Monroe, I think walkability is more based on why people are walking. Like you were saying, Commissioner Mason, it's maybe more for leisure, or it may be, I'm going point A to point B, but as far as commercial uses, it doesn't have a lot of that. So public policy as it relates to walkability, it kind of goes through us. For us, it's the general plan, zoning codes, subdivision regulations, and then our complete streets policy. So here's the future land use map we currently have adopted. Get zoomed in here a little more. You see currently a major section of this corridor that Monroe is going through is proposed to be potential conservation lands. Putting a road through that doesn't really lend to conservation. So that a bit of disparity in what happens there. And I wanted to note that Monroe actually isn't even mentioned on here. It's excluded explicitly, which speaks to the context of kind of the city that some of the residents don't desire it. When this was kind of brought up in 2015, there was a lot of pushback from some of the residents in the city in that regard. So our current zoning in the area is, again, as stated earlier, low density residential R18 and RE20 along that corridor. So the codes specify the land uses. This is a bit of my senior project, so I'm kind of double dipping, so I won't go into too much detail here. The zoning along that is large blocks and large block lengths. So as in suburban walkability, the problem we have is the streets are not laid out in a grid pattern like they are here. They're more long and windy, as in up in here. Monroe is kind of at the periphery of this really tight grid pattern, lending to greater walkability. Up here is less walkable, but the sections of Monroe that are not complete are here in these areas, right here and here. So some things to consider in the street design and subdivisions along this are the street design, the utilities, and the stormwater management. North Ogden City is about 11% roads. So stormwater is a huge part of that. And if we can consider some low impact design, maybe we can use the streets to manage stormwater as well as have a nice aesthetic. So in talking about our complete streets policy, all users are considered. So this is a kind of a before and after of a complete street. You notice that this entire space is for cars, right? There's no pedestrian or active transportation. Here they've made it one-way transportation. They've added this landscaping buffer. This isn't appropriate for Monroe, but I like this because it does show that it designates space for other uses. Here's a few more examples where they've made some changes. I like the addition of the vertical bollards or something along the side of the street to enhance the feeling of protection. Here's a more suburban feeling with these bike lanes. Again, the vertical delineators separating the space for bikes away from the automobile traffic. So as part of my project, I did a study in relation to land values and walkability. There wasn't a correlation in land values in North Ogden and walkability, but I did find out that when the walk score gets above 40, there is a correlation, generally speaking, in land values increasing with walkability. So that's something to consider because that would increase tax revenue in the future. So some recommendations as we move forward in this project: tactical urbanism. An example of tactical urbanism is something that's cheap and temporary to collect data and see if it's something that works. A good example of this that has come along is cities have closed streets in an effort to provide more outdoor space for dining as such. You know, it's in response to the pandemic. So another kind of thing is islands is used as a way to calm traffic. This provides a choke point that people slow down through the intersection because they don't feel as comfortable avoiding these objects. Or they can paint is another way to calm traffic and enhance the streetscape. They went really all out with this crazy yellow. I don't know if that's appropriate for Monroe, but it's an option. Here's another example of a tactical urbanism streetscape. They've taken looks like a two lane and some parking out to add this landscaping in. Okay, so throughout kind of just as walkability in general, as inventorying it throughout the city, I noticed there's a lot of desire paths. There's a lot of shortcuts that people like to take, that aren't necessarily designed for pedestrians. Now, some of the issues relating to walkability in North Ogden. So this is of a location of a minor subdivision that we recently processed. This application, as part of it, requires sidewalk installation right here along this street. If you look around everywhere else, there's no sidewalk. So this is going to create a situation where there's 400 feet of sidewalk or so from here to here with no access. All right, now getting into, before I go any further, are there any questions kind of about that aspect of walkability and the streetscape? No? Okay. All right, so this is the transportation and trails map. The section of the trail that we are specifically wanting to redirect is the section here down. Oh, this doesn't look very good on the, but this, I believe it's this section right here that was missed. So we will need to make sure that this section of trail gets connected here. And then along Monroe, this will be considered a trail. So that requires a minimum of a 6-foot sidewalk on one side at least. So we talked about this. Here you can see Monroe isn't even mentioned on the future use map. So here you can see the effect of when Monroe is completed sometime between 2040 and 2050. All of the demand is going to shift from, or some of the demand is going to shift from Washington over to Monroe. That causes, residents to have concerns about safety, issues like that. So if we want to come up with a streetscape design that calms traffic, looks good, and provides a nice aesthetic as well as meets the needs of all the users, I think we have a lot of opportunity in that respect for this project. So this kind of recommends the timing as well as it sets forth what minimums are going to be used. This is a staff report from back in 2015. I'm not sure if this is still kind of the plan or if this has been, the timing is based on this. So going kind of as we go forward, I want to talk about sidewalk width, bike lanes, travel lanes, and street trees. So here's kind of the existing conditions of Monroe. It's a big asphalt. I think the technical term that we've kind of used among staff and into streets like this is a traffic sewer. There's not a lot of streetscape. It's just a big path of pavement back and forth in many respects. And this is the 100-foot with, there's on-street parking. It's not well defined as in Ogden or in North Ogden. In Ogden, there's 2 travel lanes, but the on-street parking, if there is on-street parking, is very narrow. It feels like a hazard in many ways. So that's something to consider moving forward. So these are some options I've worked up as far as the streetscape without any trees. 3 lanes, 12 feet wide each, 5-foot sidewalk on one side, 6-foot side on the other with 8 foot of parking strip. No medians or anything. I haven't proposed anything like that. The location of the bike lanes is important, whether we put it out closer to the street or if we want them protected closer to the curb, and we have, if there is on-street parking, that serves as a buffer. So this one I worked up with moving, this is with moving the parking on one side of the street, leaving it just 2 lanes with the turn lane, as well as a 2-lane bike lane heading north and south on one side of the road. And maybe let me just go here to so we can have on site. There we go. All right, I'll drop our little guy in here. So this here is right at the where the Monroe goes into North Ogden. This is kind of what it looks like now if you were heading that way. And here's kind of heading back to help kind of translate from what's existing to these oh, for heck's sakes. Got all the way out of it. All right, give me a minute. All right, so here's kind of the options I've worked up for the 80-foot right of way. This will be probably for more of what we will have in our, in North Ogden. I think the majority of the areas we have are 80 feet of right of way. The lanes are really wide that lend to high travel speeds, regardless of what the speed limit is currently. And so these are the options I worked up for the 80-foot right of way. The bike lanes here are out towards traffic with 11-foot travel lanes and on-street parking with the 4-foot standard sidewalk here. And then this option, I have a 5-foot sidewalk on one side and a 6-foot option on the other with bike lanes going down one side of the street and on-street parking on the other. At this point, I think I'm ready to open it up to comments or questions from you guys.
If anyone cares about my opinion, I prefer having a bike lane, and I have reasons for that. And I prefer them on one side of the street together, like in option B. I think that's a more efficient use of the space. We have those bike lanes going up 1050, and I wonder, why do these need to be on both sides of the street like this?
I kind of take the opposite view, Brandon. In fact, I've gotten to know a couple people who've had bicycle crashes, bicycle to bicycle, and especially on hills. And there are going to be a few of those. You get some guy clipping down the street at 30 miles an hour, which is really easy to do on the hills of North Ogden. And somebody coming up the hill and they're only a couple feet apart, that scares me. I would be out in the traffic lane if I were dealing with that on my bike.
My take is I think you do sometimes have to weave around each other, but those are for 5-foot sections or so. But you're obviously a more experienced biker than I am.
But yeah, I've got a couple friends that were, in Colorado's got bicycle paths like nobody's business.
Yeah, they do.
And one was severely injured. Again, was riding at dusk. One guy was, thought he was ready for the Tour de France and came flying around a corner. Another guy was just, casually pedaling and boom. So, but that was on a dedicated bicycle path with just a line between the two lanes. I actually prefer them separate. And there's a lot of bike lanes that I won't ride in. I would much rather deal with cars than bicycles. And yeah, the one at 1050, the bicycle paths up 1050, that's the path to nowhere. It's really nice. We've got 3 blocks of bicycle paths, but they aren't connected to anything anywhere that anybody would ride on. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure that was worth the paint that we used to paint those. Yeah, the best thing you can do is give, in my opinion, and it's strictly my opinion, the best thing you can do on a bicycle lane is have 2 separate lanes on either side of the road and give them at least, if you got 3 feet, you're okay. If you've got 4 feet, you're in heaven.
So I agree, we need bike lanes for sure. So I'm a little confused when you said there's bike lanes that actually are on the same side of the street. So the traffic's like, I mean, you're always supposed to ride with the flow of traffic. So I don't remember ever seeing that. Am I confused about what you mean?
I've seen some of those too. And,
Imagine a street inside of a street almost, right? You've
Yeah.
got a broader street, and then clear over onto the maybe right-hand side is another street with bidirectional for bikes only, for bidirectional.
No, I don't think you should do that. Plus, you know, if you're no, I would never do that. I agree with Sean. I wouldn't even feel comfortable. I don't know.
I think it encourages bad habits. And that's one of the other things is when you're out, you know, on a serious, 50, 60, 80 mile ride or whatever. And there's, bicycles are a great form of transportation. It's probably the most efficient form of transportation there is. But when you're heading down the road and you see some guy coming straight at you in what you figure is your bike lane, you're riding on the shoulder, and there's some guy coming straight at you, 90% of the time, the guy does not have a helmet on. He doesn't, he isn't dressed. You just keep looking. It's like, oh, that guy just lost his driver's license. That's why he's on a bicycle. I'm not real enthused about having.
Well, once again, I have a popular opinion.
So it sounds to me like for the 80-foot right of way. Yeah, it sounds to me like for the 80-foot right of way, option A tends to be what people would like to see is bike lanes on both sides of the road.
Yeah.
Parking lanes, center lane, and a single lane of traffic each way.
Yeah, I think that would, and it does also encourages, when you're trying to teach kids how to ride, it teaches them that there's a proper side to ride on, which actually helps when they start driving too.
We're not about teaching kids how to drive here, Don. We're trying to figure out the road.
I know.
Just kidding.
Well, I mean, there's so many more questions to this, though. I mean, granted, yeah, we addressed. I think we all agree that we want a bike lane, right? And I have evidence for that, which I'll spare you.
Fantastic. And Monroe would be a great way because I hate riding on. Well, I don't ride. I ride on Washington just far enough to get to another cross street.
Yeah. So I mentioned that I run on that, and I never run by myself. And I run with a bunch of people from work, and they don't live in North Ogden, but this is their favorite route is to start up at my house, come down 1050, go down Mountain Road, and then Monroe to we obviously end with breakfast because we're not running for exercise. But people from Plain City and West Haven and Riverdale, really this is their favorite. I think this is going to be a popular route for people on bikes.
Oh, I agree. Yeah. I agree. I think it has all kinds of potential that way.
But it begs the question, though: do we want to slow traffic down in other ways? And I don't know how I feel about any of these, but with the center lane, with the median, those kind of things, right? Because the reason people are attracted to it is it's less. It's not Washington, right? You're not 45, 50 miles an hour right next to you and busy.
Yeah. No, but we got to also remember that the main purpose for Monroe Boulevard is that second artery north and south for North Ogden.
Yeah, I wasn't saying we do want to. I was just posing the question, do we?
Yeah. And so I would say, obviously we need to dress the sides of the street up. I don't know that, medians for a road we're trying to promote traffic on or to handle traffic. I would not like the medians just for the simple. I like the way they look, but the functionality and maintenance of the street with those involved, I think causes issues, but.
As far as features that slow down traffic, I've heard in jest, I've heard people say that the very best feature to slow down traffic is a black and white Yukon with lights on top.
I would say, probably if we were going to do any road features, my suggestion would possibly be that you curve the, let's say 40 feet prior to an intersection, you might bring the curb and gutter in to the edge of the bike lane rather than the parking. So it kind of narrows up. So you get that visual narrowing of the road at the intersections. So you don't have the parking right up to the stop sign. So you really probably wouldn't have street parking on the side of the road within, let's say 30 feet of the intersection or something. That's where the park strip might come in and widen out to come into the edge of the bike lane. And I think that would be, as far as structures in a road, where I think that would provide a very good softening, traffic calming device, because the intersections are going to look narrower and you're not going to have parked cars right where a stop sign is. So it allows for visual safety into an intersection.
I like that. Yeah, especially if you are encouraging bicycles, keeping cars from parking right up to the stop sign, which happens all too often.
Yeah, and you don't have a bike sitting next to a parked car at a stop sign, and then nobody sees them.
Yeah. The other thing, and I know the right of way has already been purchased, and I don't know if there's anything you can do about it, but when you got a dead arrow, an arrow straight road, there's nothing that encourages driving fast than a long straight road where you can see, or at least you think you can see, where you're going to be 10 minutes from where you're at.
Yeah, and I think that's the other reason why I'd suggest the intersections to swell out the curb like that, because you're going to see you may be able to put some low plants or grass or something in that area that it's just like visually your road looks like it gets smaller.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the number one inviting road in North Ogden that visually seems like you could just drive fast is probably 1050. And that's usually because there's not any cars ever parked on the side of the road, and it's very wide, and it's just one straight shot down. And you think, man, I mean, there's enough busyness on Washington Boulevard and cars that it kind of almost controls itself. But
by the way, that's a 40-45 mile an hour bicycle road.
I've been passed by a bike going down that while I'm driving my car, thinking, rules don't apply to bikes, remember? They want to be treated like traffic, but they don't have to stop at red lights and they don't have to follow speed limits.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I've been pulled over for. I almost had to brag about it. I got pulled over for passing a motorhome on the double yellow.
On your bike?
On my bicycle.
All right, so Monroe, maybe those are some suggestions. Kai, at this point, or do you have more? You mentioned you want to talk about street trees or what?
Yeah, what are your flavors for, do you want to require a certain tree, or do you want to kind of let that, what do you want to do as far as trees, I guess, really is, what are your thoughts?
Personally myself, I would say, yes, I would like to see some street trees along there, but I'm not to the point where I would like to mandate a type of species and in a sense, if you look at it and say, we want a certain look on Washington Boulevard and we want the crabapple and we want all that stuff, I'm not necessarily thinking that Monroe needs to be identical to that as well. But again, how we do that and make sure that it's nice, I don't know.
We had to do that along Barker Parkway. They required certain trees. And, as a resident, Monroe along there's going to be residential. You can require 2 trees for home in the parking strip and give a list of trees for them to pick from. So you will plant this tree rather than we had a list of trees we could pick from. It met what the city wanted.
Well, haven't we learned in here that the trees, that the city by and large wants walkability, the residents when they're surveyed, and trees promote walkability, right? And so I'm very much in favor of, and the downside to trees is that it hinders commercial, right? So I'm in favor of trees and a tree mandate here because it hits all those things, right? It's a fairly flat road for most. I know it's going to start to go up the hill, but it just seems like it encourages walkability. And it doesn't have the cost of detracting from commercial, since this isn't commercial. So I'd even propose, I maybe a little further than you, Eric, because I would say, yeah, we could have a certain look to the city, you know, have that seedless cherry tree or whatever it was. That's my, and again, I'm seem to not really exactly be batting 1,000 here tonight, but that's my take.
Well, I think when we did that a couple years ago, we picked a few different tree options then that were acceptable, and I think we just stuck with that. It wouldn't hurt.
Yeah, I would agree. I think if we do that, and maybe that, like Commissioner Barker said, we just have a spacing requirement and says here so many, and we have a tree lined road, and you know, Commissioner Mason, you do bring up a good point that I had totally forgot is, you know, this road really isn't going to accommodate commercials, so it enables us to have more of those trees and not cause any of the negativity that the trees have caused on Washington.
On option A, let's talk about this. I guess the sidewalk issue needs to be addressed. If there's going to be a trail, it will need to be considered a 6-foot sidewalk. We want to maybe do a 6-foot sidewalk on one side and a 4-foot sidewalk on the other.
Yeah, that would probably be fine.
That's my vote. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. 4-foot sidewalks are okay for little kids to run up and down, but if you got two adults walking side by side, it's kind of a push. I know most of the people I see walking in our neighborhood, because our neighborhoods all has 4-foot sidewalks, and they're always walking, and people walking the street.
Are there questions of symmetry? I mean, do we think that would be? Do we want to do 6 and 5? I mean, I'm just trying to visualize what a 6-foot sidewalk on one side would look like.
I think what it would do is kind of, if like the kids can play and everything, if they're out on the sidewalk, they'll, they don't really care. But if you've got adults that are out walking, they'll probably shift over to the 6-foot side. Because
I'm just wondering, what does it look like when you're driving down it, though? I don't know. I'm just asking the question. Is it out of balance?
I wouldn't think so. Your park strip might be a little bit bigger on the one side.
Most people are looking at their phones anyway, so they wouldn't notice it.
But I would say that if you're trying to make it a place that's desirable to walk, I think a widened sidewalk on both sides might be something to consider. Just because it's just having it only on one side, I think it doesn't make it as much of a community resource amenity type feel. It's hard to verbalize why beyond that, but that's my perspective.
Yeah, the only issue I have is it seems to me like the only time people walk on a sidewalk is if there's not a street next to it. So anytime I pass people walking or jogging or running, they're in the street and the sidewalk is empty. In neighborhoods that have 6-foot walks, 4-foot walks, it seems like that's where they go. But I think to me the park strip is vital to bring in some greenery and some vegetation as well. So I would prefer wide on one side and a bigger park strip.
Chair, you've got a chat from Evan. He's asked a question.
Oh, yeah, the chat. The trees on Washington were selected for power line restrictions in mind. Will Monroe have similar restrictions? Or do we have the opportunity for taller trees? Yeah, power lines along Monroe will all be underground. I don't know where there might be some existing. I know there's some existing power lines that kind of cross through some areas that would come into play, but there won't, as far as I know, I don't think there's anything that run parallel with the road that we would have to contend with like Washington. So that does open us up to, the ability to some taller trees.
So we could do the 80-foot sycamores like they have in Brigham City.
Well, the thing you'd have to be concerned about, the trees you put along those park strips cannot be so big that they start to make the sidewalk rise and ruin your curb and gutter. As we
Yeah.
specific that.
Yeah, they could be some columnar type trees that still
Right.
have a smaller root system, but might go a little bit taller and more column like. But yeah.
Okay, so I'll work on some details for option A, maybe a few changes and come back with that. For the 100-foot right of way, what are your guys, what's the commission's perspective and thoughts? Which option did you prefer?
Hey, Kai, can I add something about that 100-foot right of way?
Please.
It is 100-foot right where it connects to Ogden, but based on our right of way that we've acquired, it soon reduces down to 80 feet before we get to 1700.
Okay, so we should probably spend most of our time with regards to the 80-foot then.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, do you have any comments on the 80-foot options, Lauren?
No, I think I will as I review them in more detail. But okay. I like some of the comments that have been made about narrowing the intersections and stuff. So.
Okay, awesome. Thanks for your input, Lauren. Okay. Lynn, I'm going to stop sharing. I think I have everything I need from you guys, commissioners. Do you have any more comments?
I don't think so.
Lynn, will you bring up Exhibit C? I would like to look at that really quick, and I don't have it accessible relatively quickly.
Which one is Exhibit C?
This one right here. So this is some maps that, these are some maps that the Wasatch Front Regional Council put together for us. Kind of, well, it was a training and we went to a couple of years ago. It brings together some opportunities for walkability. It identifies the land uses such as jobs, street connectivity, and employment, housing, and things like that. So this map on the far right kind of combines all these metrics into where you have opportunities for walkability. Lynn, if you would zoom in on the map of the right of the walking opportunity right in North Ogden where we're at, it will show kind of the opportunities for walkability we have existing. So most of the opportunity we have for walkability is kind of right in between Washington and the future of area of Monroe Boulevard. You can't really see it, but it is saying somewhat opportunity in that area, but more or less information and food for your thought going forward. That's the only thing I had wanted to share in regards to that. Any questions?
Thank you, Kai.
Yep.
So commissioners, the next step is for us to prepare an ordinance that would then come back before you for adoption. Unless you want to discuss it some more.
You're talking an ordinance for Streetscape for Monroe itself, right?
Right. So
the
idea was that we have an overall streetscape provision, and so the project is going to be to identify specific standards for types of roads. So we're moving through those.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to item number 10, update on the current land survey. Rob?
So commissioners, we are trying to do an update to our land use survey on a periodic basis. I wanted to make sure we did it this year since it's a census year. And once we get the census, we'll line up some of the data that we've collected here with that census data. So it'll probably be another year before they start rolling out some of that information. But there's a little cover memo that I've written and the survey that shows the obvious that North Ogden is growing. And we're about 3,600 acres now. And we've probably got about 2,000 acres left of vacant land to grow into. So it's probably, our build out is probably 20, 30, maybe even 40 years from now. Yeah, so it's more of an information item than anything, unless anybody had any questions.
None for me. Anyone else? All right. Thank you, Rob.
Yeah.
There'll be a quiz on this. Everybody needs to memorize it. There'll be a quiz in a couple of months. All right.
Lynn, write
remarks.
that down.
Yeah. Dawn, your quiz is next meeting, since it'll be the last.
Okay.
Have that memorized.
Oh, sure, I will.
3 to 5 minute speech on the item. All right. Any remarks from planning commissioners?
Is this Don's last meeting?
I believe it was got one more, right?
Okay.
One more. I thought they were supposed to have the seats filled by, was it the, I don't know, 20th or 2030? I don't know.
Yeah,
You're
you
here next
expire on the 31st, and so they will.
I expire. Thanks.
Now, that didn't sound right, did it? No, your term expires, and so they will appoint someone and have them ready for the first meeting in February.
Okay.
Unless people storm the city building and demand that Dawn stay in office.
I'm not too worried about that.
We might. Sorry about that thing. If you need to mark yes, I could hear you at the first thing we had, an item that we had
on the
vote. Like say yes for me. I could hear everything and I couldn't get to my buttons or whatever's going on here. So anyway.
Oh, okay.
I'll amend that.
So we had a last meeting, we discussed an area where the applicant wanted, it was the Barkers, and Commissioner Barker recused himself. I'm just bringing this up so you guys can tickle your memory about what it was. The applicant wanted larger lots, and some of the neighbors wanted smaller lots so that their homes didn't feel dwarfed. I felt a little blind in that because I mean, maybe, I don't know. I didn't have
it's never happened before.
Yeah, that took me off guard. But also, I just wasn't. They kept saying, "Oh, this is a real unique neighborhood," and they had their reasons. And I really wanted to know if we made the right decision there. I went and drove through that the next morning, the neighborhood they were talking about, and where that future development will go. And I just think we did make the right decision. I think that neighborhood, it's certainly nice, and I don't feel like the larger lots will detract to that in the least. I think it's the perfect overlay. I guess I just wanted to give that feedback that I think we did the right thing, given this new information that I've had my foot, or at least I've driven through the area. So,
Makeup work is not accepted. So.
No, but I mean, it certainly is a nice neighborhood, and I don't see that other similar sized lots will detract from that. I just, I mean, I know that people have their reasons, but I think we made the right call on that. I just wanted everybody to know on that. And it's unfortunate. Sometimes it would be nice, and I know we're real limited right now, but to visit some of these places, physically, because that would have, I could have spoke to that a little better maybe in that last meeting.
Yeah.
And I go on Google Earth and stuff like that, especially here at home. I've got 2 monitors, for work and stuff, so I can have multiple things going on in the meeting, but there's nothing like actually seeing it.
Okay, any other comments? All right. How about Rob? Anything more from you?
Just
Brandon?
quickly, commissioners, just to let you know, planning staff is incredibly busy. I would think with COVID and what have you, that maybe the economy and so forth would be going a little bit south. Well, it's really been the opposite as far as the development activity within the city. It's been pretty amazing to try to balance all of that and still try to put forth initiatives to make appropriate changes. I give that example as some of this ordinance work that we're doing, the land use code, sensitive land overlay, et cetera. So it's a busy time for us, and hopefully we'll all pull together as we go through and hopefully have a whole lot more positive year than this past one. So thanks for all your support.
Thanks, Rob. John, are you with us? Anything from you?
Yeah, just an update. I think it was brought to my attention that I maybe wasn't clear, and we had talked about in the past, the General Plan Steering Committee was looking at requesting a what do they call it, a temporary land use ordinance or a moratorium, tied to one of those, and basically not doing zoning. And as part of that discussion, the council had mentioned they would not be entertaining zoning changes moving forward, other than those that I think were already on the table, like Cooperstown, for example. And I can tell you that the mayor was caught off a little off guard by the request that Brandon Mason just mentioned, but I do think that they understand it's a minor one that kind of is continuing the exact same development. And that is going to the council next week. But just so you know, there might be some staff comments coming for future zoning requests that kind of say, hey, commission, the council's indicated they're not super thrilled about entertaining a lot more of these until we get our future land use plan in place. And so anyways, just wanted you to be aware of that. I also wanted you to be aware, it was already talked about the applications for the new, or for the appointing of a new commissioner or commissioners. And those, we have started seeing applications coming in. If you do have friends or neighbors or people that in the community who you think would be valuable, please encourage them to apply. I haven't seen any of the applications. I'm sure we've received some good ones already, but it always really helps the mayor to get a lot of applications and a lot of information so he can make the decision that he feels most comfortable with. So other than that, I'm glad we made it to the next year, and super glad to continue working with everybody. So thank you for all you do. Sorry, one other thing, sorry. If by chance your hoodie does not fit, please let me know. The one caveat is I don't have a lot of smaller sizes, but I do have some larger sizes. So don't hesitate to let me know.
Nobody ever buys the right size for me, and you guys nailed it. Well, it could have been a tall, but it's still my favorite hoodie.
It is an awesome, awesome hoodie. Thank you very, very much. I love it. So.
Excellent.
If it doesn't fit in 9 months, can we let you know?
Yeah. Sure. I mean, you can let me know, but we'll see.
All right, thank you. Anything else from anybody?
Yeah, let's guess how many X's was my size hoodie.
2.
Comfortable.
It's a baggy hoodie.
Size comfortable. So, all right. Well, thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
We will have a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
All right.
Okay.
I'll second
We have a motion. All in favor for adjournment? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thanks, guys. See you in a couple weeks.
Have a good
Bye.
time. Bye.
All right.